Does anyone know what the single biggest killer of men under the age of 50 is?
Car crashes.
No.
Illness.
No. The single biggest killer of men under the age of 50 is suicide. And when I heard that, I just couldn't believe it. How could the single biggest killer of men be themselves? And in America, suicide is at a 70-year high, with one man killing himself every 13 minutes. That means by the end of this talk, another person would have passed away. And in Australia, where I'm from, 7 men kill themselves every single day. And a 2021 American study found that 15% of men had 0 close friends. That's up from 3% in 1990. What this means is that we are witnessing the single biggest men's health issue that we face today. And for the women watching, this issue still affects you. Yes, suicides are 80% male, but I just want you to close your eyes for a moment and picture someone. Picture a brother, a friend, a partner, or maybe even a son that could be one of these future statistics. But for everyone watching today, I've come up with one clear way that we can solve this issue, and that is why being weak is actually strong. But first, let's address the elephant in the room. You see? And that is, I'm Batman. We all know who Batman is, but who was the man behind the mask? You see, that was Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne grew up witnessing his parents' horrific murder. And he channeled all that trauma to have one of the most amazing physiques, learn all the world's best martial arts, and have the greatest technology at the end of his fingertips for fighting crime. And he channeled all of that to fight injustice on the streets of Gotham. But can we just imagine for a moment if Batman, or Bruce Wayne, came home from a tough day of fighting crime on the streets, wearing his cape and his mask and everything together, and he sat down at the dinner table with his wife and kids and said, "Pass the mashed potatoes, because justice never sleeps." And his wife is just like, "Bruce, can you just take off the mask? We're trying to have dinner." But in all seriousness, just like Batman, we all wear masks in our lives too. We wear them every day, and we wear them to keep safe. And if we use our masks to keep safe, it can do that. But the problem I see, and the reason why I share this story with you, is that so many men I see can never take that mask off. That mask becomes their identity. And if you don't know who you are, how can you ever know what's going on underneath? How can anyone ever connect with you on any level? You see, in order to be a superhero in our lives, it requires us to actually take off that mask and be vulnerable. And Dr. Brené Brown, who's a fellow TED speaker and a psychology expert, she says, "Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage." To be vulnerable, it is incredibly difficult, because when you're vulnerable, absolutely anything could happen in that moment. But here's the thing. Here's the key secret when it comes to being vulnerable, and that is genuine connection. You have the ability to actually connect and share what's going on. That's the real superpower. When I was in my early 20s, I finished my university degree in psychology, and I decided to work as a social worker. And I used to work with some of the children in Australia that had the most absolutely horrible starts to life. These are children who have been physically abused, sexually abused, and had the most significant trauma that it still sits with me today. And by the time that these children are 10 years old, they lived in 100 different homes. I don't know if you can imagine that for a moment, living in 100 different homes and having 100 different parents, how that would affect you mentally and how you connect with other people. But me, I was bright-eyed, full of optimism, and ready to go working in my first social work group home. On a hot Australian summer day, I walk into a house, and I noticed that the walls are eggshell white and peeling off the walls. And the carpet was this old, dirty black carpet. You know, it kind of smelled like a wet dog. You know that wet dog smell. And I walk in there, and there's a 15-year-old boy, James, standing in the kitchen, leaning on the counter, watching TV into the other room. And I come up to James and I say, "Hey, James, my name is Kain. I'm going to be your social worker, and you might want to get ready for school because you might miss the school bus." And James stopped what he was doing, turned to me, pulled out a kitchen drawer, pulled out a knife and said, "If you keep talking about school, I'm going to put this into your head." I was shocked. My mouth went dry. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. And suddenly it dawned upon me, I don't remember anything in my university degree about how to deal with knife negotiation. But somehow I managed to calm down, and James calmed down too. And miraculously, he actually went off to school. But I remember just standing in the kitchen, standing there and going, why did he do that to me? Why is he treating me this way? It just didn't make sense to me. And it wasn't until much, much later that I found the reason. You see, the reason why James was acting that way and why I share this story with you is because he was wearing a mask. And it wasn't until much, much later in our relationship where I could take off my mask and he could take off his, that he could share with me that he was going through something. You see, James said, I'm being bullied at school, Kain, and I just wanted to control my environment. And I didn't want to go there anymore. That's why I was acting that way. And so many of our lives, we are wearing masks when we're going through something. But if we never share what we're going through, how can anyone understand what's happening? When I was younger, I used to love Friday nights because Friday nights with my dad meant movie night. And we used to go to Blockbuster. For those old enough to remember it, it was a video store in the 90s and 2000s. And it had this bright blue and yellow logo that said Blockbuster Video. I'd walk in there and the whole place smelled like popcorn and fresh plastic. You know that sort of plasticky popcorn smell? And I'd run down the aisles and my eyes would always light up when I'd see the poster of Arnold Schwarzenegger. The sunglasses, giant cigar, the guns, the biceps. And I look at that and I go, yeah, strong, silent, emotionless. He's the ultimate badass. But there was one key thing that I didn't realize about Arnold Schwarzenegger until much, much later. You see, Arnold Schwarzenegger, yes, he could jump out of an airplane. And yes, he could ride a horse with one hand and shoot people with the other. And yes, he could ride a motorbike at full speed into the wall and then jump off at the last second and not have a scratch on him. And at the end of the day, yes, he always got the girl. But there was one key thing that he couldn't do. And that was share emotion. I mean, think about it. The movie Terminator. His whole job in that movie is to play a robot. And robots have no emotion. So his whole job is to not act at all. Maybe that's why he was such a great actor. And guys, if you don't know this, I actually have secret news about the new Terminator 7 and who's playing it. The person that's playing Arnold Schwarzenegger in the new Terminator movie is ChatGPT. I thought my entire life, that's what being a man is. That's what real masculinity is. But what I realized later, and why I share this story with you, is that being this Terminator type figure, strong, robotic, impenetrable, where nothing can hit you or hurt you, somewhere along the way, we found that masculinity meant to not be seen, to be safe. But when we do that, cracks can form underneath. And we never know what's happening underneath that armor, what's happening to the person underneath that. And to be a real man isn't only just about being strong and courageous. It's about being honest in your own vulnerability too. And psychologists these days and critics say that there's this term they throw around called toxic masculinity. And I'm not completely sold with the diagnosis, because to imply that masculinity is toxic is that there's something wrong in itself. And there's a fantastic book written by Douglas Moore and Robert Gillette called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And it's a book about the 4 male masculine archetypes throughout time. And they have a fantastic quote about what they believe masculinity is. They say, mature masculinity is not abusive or domineering, but generative, creative, and empowering of the self and others. To me, that's what masculinity is. Masculinity is not telling other people what to do and dominating and domineering them. No. Real masculinity is about being strong enough to be gentle, to be bold enough to be seen. And yes, it can be about leading other people, but I think more importantly, it's about serving others selflessly. That's what it means to be a real man. And you can see I'm passionate about this topic because I've written a book about it in the past. So why do we wear masks? It's a great question. You see, psychologists say that when we're born, when we're little children, we have this giant ball of narcissism around us that protects us. And our parents grow that narcissism by saying we're perfect and they love us and we can do no wrong. But slowly our friends and teachers and peers chip away at that ball of narcissism with rejection and criticism, and it slowly leaves us with a healthy, balanced ego in the end of the day. But what can happen sometimes is we get so much criticism against us that we actually find a way to keep safe. And how can we keep safe? Well, we wear a mask. There's a real safety in there, real safety to come into that bunker to protect yourself. But what can happen so many times is when you wear a mask for so long, it becomes your own face. About 5 years ago, I was booked in for a routine stomach operation, and I felt petrified because I never liked the idea of anesthetic and being put to sleep. But when I found out that my father's high school friend, Dr. Hope, was going to be doing the operation, I felt a lot more relieved. And I remember walking into his office one day, and he had this beautiful Persian rug, and on top of the Persian rug was this giant mahogany table, and on the table was a picture of him, his wife, his 2 kids, and the background was this giant mansion. And Dr. Hope told me to come in and sit down, and he was incredibly warm, charismatic, and just made you feel at ease. And at the end of the consultation, he said to me, Kain, you're going to be completely fine. Routine operation, done it over 100 times, and I'm going to look after you. And I remember just walking away, feeling completely calm about the whole situation. But fast forward a couple of weeks later, I received a phone call from the nurse. She said, unfortunately, the operation's been cancelled. And I said, cancelled? What do you mean? Well, why has it been cancelled? She said, well, unfortunately, Dr. Hope, he committed suicide. When I heard that, my heart completely sunk. How could this be true? How could someone who seems to have the most perfect wife and kids, the most perfect home, the most perfect career, be suffering so much he wanted to end it all? And I share this story with you today, guys, because you see, Dr. Hope, he was wearing a mask. He was wearing a mask until the very end. And if someone like Dr. Hope is wearing a mask and suffering in silence, then how many of you out there are suffering as well? If he could have taken off that mask, then maybe he would still be here today. To everyone watching today, I ask you, please, it's time to take off our masks. It's time to embrace vulnerability. And like I said, it's so hard to be vulnerable. Anything can happen. I've been there. I've shared it all and been met with laughter and rejection, all the worst things. But that's why I say why being weak is actually strong. Because when you do that, that's where real strength is. That's where you can connect as a person. That is what it can be to save one life. Your life is important. You're an important person. And we need you in our community. So please, take it off. In Australia, we have this thing every year called Are You OK Day? And it's a day once a year where we check in with our friends and family to make sure they're all right. But what if instead of one day, we always had that in the back of our minds, to check in with other people to make sure they're okay? And for everyone listening today, I have an ask of you. The 5 minutes that you would take to post me on your social media story or share it with your friends, I would love for you to do that. But what would be more important is if you took that 5 minutes and actually reached out to a friend. Maybe it's someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Maybe it's someone you haven't seen. And just check in and ask, are they generally okay? And as for this Mass, ladies and gentlemen, the irony is, to be the real superhero in our lives, we actually need to share our real identity. We need to leave the mask behind. Embrace vulnerability. Share who you are. Because if we can take that first step in being who we really are, being vulnerable, being present, then that is all it takes to save someone else's life, but more importantly, your own. And we have a true crack at solving this men's health issue together forever. Thank you.